Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at Intel. It is time for another update and we have finally gotten the larger correction we have been waiting for. In the last few videos I kept mentioning that we didn't have a good indication to be looking for a position as it kept pushing higher and higher. We would have been just submitting to the FOMO, ending up possibly buying the top where, a lot of people, most of which is probably retail, have been buying this top, right? Well, from these levels, we can see that the stock has already dropped nearly 20%. We don't want to be doing that. We want to buy within the support zone, and now that this larger correction has finally emerged, an opportunity may finally appear. Now, on this chart, we have been tracking a few ideas of how this structure could overall develop. We have been suggesting a possible diagonal pattern, and honestly, that possibility has still not disappeared, but since we've had so much strength in this movement to the upside, we have to give more and more credit to this idea of a green wave tree that would be information within the idea of an impulse, where yes, we would still expect to push to higher prices within it, we would still expect to continue to even higher prices even once it forms a more substantial top. Why is that? Well, because we would have several 1-2 setups we could be tracking in this overall structure, and we would need to build a 4-5 pattern for each and every single one of these 1-2 setups that would lead to significantly higher prices over, of course, a more substantial period of time. It could end up realistically taking several years before we would have a more substantial top even within this as a larger wave tree in blue. Now, without turning this into a daydreaming video, let's focus on the internal structure, because I believe this wave tree, if it is to actually be building, would actually have to extend higher. And within this structure, so far I do not have 5 waves, which wouldn't even allow me to track this as a wave tree, right? For this to be a wave tree in green, I need Intel to still be extending to higher prices, and I actually have quite clear levels that this structure needs to hold to still be able to push to higher prices. That is because even if I were to agree to track this entire movement to the upside as a single wave 1 and have this as a wave 2, we actually wouldn't have reached the ideal target of the wave tree itself. That, paired with the fact that we don't have 5 waves to the upside, not within an impulse, not within anything, we cannot trust this larger wave tree to be complete. And if it fails to follow through, we need to be prepared for possibly a quite substantial failure on this chart. So, I am focused on the structure that I have provided in the previous video. I did provide actually a couple of areas of support previously, right, for this yellow wave 4, but also for a possible internal extension within this internal movement to the upside as a wave 3. But I have decided to keep things simple and focus on one structure alone, also since within this correction we have already gotten into the support levels of the larger wave 4 itself in yellow, right? In white we were tracking an area of support that would have allowed still further extensions, and I am still considering the possibility of this internal wave tree extending to higher prices. But for practical purposes, we do not really need to care too much about that support zone, because we would still need to assume the possible risk of going as low as the 50% retracement, and a failure wouldn't be apparent within this overall structure without getting a sustained break below the levels of support down to $93, right? I would typically expect to not get just a dip below this last level of support and recover for this to be considered a failure. I would expect in the case of a failure for this structure, for this support zone to be taken out. And maybe it doesn't even need to be taken out directly. We may even get a recovery, but if we end up trading and trending below this last level of support, most likely this entire pattern, this entire idea of a larger wave tree impulse in green is quite likely to fail. And I would need to be prepared and prepare you for a possibly quite wide failure on this chart, where it is practically still possible for this to be tracked as a wave C to the upside in a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Even though it has succeeded in breaking any of our expectations for a diagonal structure, which we have been tracking before this very strong movement to the upside, we still have the pattern in place that we would expect of a diagonal structure, where within the wave 5, we would have an A, B, C pattern in place. And I personally really do not prefer this interpretation. I strongly prefer that this is building something significantly more bullish. But once again, if these levels of support in yellow fail, right, down to $93, we need to be prepared for a more substantial failure of this structure. We would need to be prepared for the pattern to become significantly less predictable and less reliable. And that is why I am focused strictly on discount, where I am looking to build what could be an ABC correction. Frankly, it doesn't matter too much what type of correction is building within this movement to the downside. I am simply watching the levels of support, and from a larger time frame perspective, I am looking for a 3-wave correction that could of course eventually turn into a triangle, into a more complex WXY correction. But for now, this is what I'm watching. And for a signal, for example, that this wave C, let's say, wouldn't be forming even an additional low, I would be watching up to the 61.8% retracement for such a wave 4 correction. And if we manage to get past these levels of resistance, most likely we will need to consider that, yeah, perhaps this is a wave C isn't going to succeed in following through, isn't going to provide to us that one additional low we would typically expect, that maybe it's a different pattern that would end up being formed within this structure. So far, I do not really believe we have reasons to expect this wave 4 to not be playing out and to get one more low within this as a wave 5. But distortions are not uncommon at all, especially within such small time frames, and we will have to wait over the weekend and see how these structures develop when the market opens. But for me, watching the 61.8% retracement here at $116 is going to be something worth doing. Indeed, this overall movement to the downside is not very clear, right? I can be tracking this as a potential 5-wave pattern, but the actual structure we have here is quite complex, and in reality we could assign multiple counts to it, which is why I am personally not even too focused on the structure itself, and I am rather more focused on maybe the ideal target for a correction in this area. Maybe the 100% extension of a wave A would have already been achieved at $108, and that doesn't mean we need to stop there. Perhaps a triangle is what took place here within this as a wave B, in which case even the ideal target would be shifting down a little, but this is not a big difference, right? From a bigger picture perspective, we are looking at this area of support down to $93, and against this level, we can still prefer to extend to higher prices, still within this area of an impulse on this chart. And for now, we will stop here. These are the levels. This is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and if you enjoyed the content and want to support it directly, check out the channel membership, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.